What happens when a poor, modest girl suddenly finds a mistake that could expose a mafia scheme? She is humiliated, fired, and broken, until one person does the impossible. What happens next turns everything you believed in upside down. The pot of porridge is burning. A thin stream of smoke rose up, hitting the ceiling, the same black stained tiles that had been promised to be replaced 10 years ago. Sophia stirred with a wooden spoon, as if not noticing that everything was ruined. And indeed, she wasn't worried about the porridge right now. Behind her, on the old worn-out sofa, lay her mother, pale, with a vacant stare, in the same nightgown she had worn when the autumn cold had arrived. "Eat while it's hot," Sophia said quietly, without even looking up. Not out of anger, out of exhaustion, out of hopeless habit. Her mother didn't answer. She just raised her eyebrows slightly, as if something in her life was once again lacking salt, or too salty. Sophia walked over, put the plate on a stool, and returned to the kitchen. The stove hissed. Familiar curses came from the neighbors below, the same old man demanding his money back again. Through the wall, she could hear someone turning on the water, someone coughing, someone living without asking permission. She pulled the elastic out of her hair and ran her fingers through it. She hadn't slept a wink all night, working on reports until morning. Tomorrow was her interview, the third one this month. She knew they wouldn't hire her. "It's not your cup of tea, Sophia. You're not the right type. Even if you're 3 times better than the others, you still look like you live in a basement, and you smell like potatoes and bleach." An old alarm clock rang in the hallway. It didn't know that no one had listened to it in a long time. Sophia turned off the stove, pulled on a dark dress, wiped her boots with a wet rag, and glanced in the mirror. A stubborn girl with the eyes of a tired woman stared back at her. "Are you going out like that?" came a hoarse voice from the room. Sophia froze. She turned around. Her mother was lying in the same position, but her voice was lively and sharp. "Why?" Sophia replied calmly. "You said it's not how you look. It's what's in your head." "Well, it's obvious you're not good with money," her mother whispered with a crooked smile. "If you dressed like a normal person, you might find a man." Sophia said nothing. The words stuck somewhere in her chest, next to the children's drawings that her mother had once thrown in the trash. "Don't disgrace yourself. You're not an artist anyway." She picked up the folder with the papers, looked at the walls covered with peeling paint, and took a deep breath. Not because she was afraid, just because if she didn't breathe, she could forget. And if she forgot, she would stay here again. Forever. On her way out, she stumbled over the threshold, the same one her father had asked to be replaced long ago, before he left. Sophia whispered silently, "Thanks for the start to the day," and slammed the door behind her. It was cloudy outside. The asphalt glistened after the night rain, and only in her stomach did something like hope stir. Small, like a match. But if you don't blow it out, maybe it will catch fire. We've only just begun this story, but it will become even more painful and true. Stay and see what a person who has been rejected by their own can do. The reception area smelled of coffee and antiseptic. Sophia stood near the desk, clutching her resume in her hands. The paper was slightly damp from her palms. The girl tried not to breathe too loudly, as if even the air in this office wasn't meant for people like her. The secretary tapped away at the keyboard, sipping coffee from a glittery mug. She glanced at the girl and smiled stiffly. "Have a seat. They'll call you in." Sophia nodded and sat down on the edge of a leather sofa. She didn't lean back. She didn't want to ruin it. To her left, someone was chewing gum and scrolling through their phone. The girl in the lime-colored jacket looked confident and well-groomed, and she smelled like she was from another world. "You're an intern, right?" she asked unexpectedly. "Excuse me?" "Well, you're here for an internship, right? Like No experience, but really want to work? Sophia lowered her gaze slightly. Not exactly. I'm an analyst. I have a couple of projects. Digitization, auditing. I'm finishing up now. Yeah. Sure, she interrupted and buried her face in the screen again. There are a lot of people like you here. Smart. But smart people are usually useless. Sophia fell silent again. She was used to conversations like this. Used to doesn't mean it didn't hurt. A man in a light-colored shirt came out of the office. He was tall, with a stern gaze. The entire office seemed to fall silent for a second. He walked past without looking at anyone. But when he reached the desk, he said to the girl, "Who's that?" The secretary turned around. "Sophia. Analyst. Fourth quarter project." "We'll see," he said, and left. Not another word. No smile, no gesture, just icy control. When Sophia entered the office, her heart was pounding. The same man was standing by the window. Thomas, the department head. She felt that she was standing in front of a man who could see everything, even what she was trying to hide. He nodded toward a chair. "Are you from Rekhnaya?" Sophia clenched her fingers. "Yes." "Is that where the buses still run on a 1900 schedule?" She smiled slightly. "Almost. Except they don't run on holidays." He didn't answer. He just sat down and started leafing through papers. "Did you really do the audit by hand, without software?" "Yes." "Why?" "There were no computers, only paper balance sheets. I calculated everything using a formula. 18,000 lines." He looked up. "Impressive. But that doesn't mean you'll last here. We have our own rules." Sophia nodded, trying to keep her back straight. "I'm not asking for any favors. Just give me a chance." He looked at her intently. "People like you get eaten alive here, because you're too proper." The phrase hit her hard. Too proper. Not too smart. Not too rude. Not too bold. Just proper. As if it were a vice. She left the office feeling as if she had been turned around at the door, and everything inside her whispered, "But he's right. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay and see how the hero puts everyone in their place." From day one, Sophia understood that this was not just an office. It was a jungle. Only instead of trees, there were glass walls. Instead of vines, there were cable networks. And instead of predators, there were smiling colleagues with perfect teeth and knives in their inboxes. Her desk stood in the corner, next to a gray column, as if the office itself was trying to hide her so she wouldn't be an eyesore. She was given an old computer with keys that stuck and a mouse that clung to the mouse pad. Sophia silently wiped the dust off the monitor, took out a notebook, and started working. No greetings, no coffee. She tackled the spreadsheets. They were a mess, like someone else's thoughts. She counted by hand. The silence around her was not a sound, but a position. On the second day, she brought lunch in a container. Rice with carrots. Someone in the break room snorted. "Are we on a health kick?" She didn't answer. She sat in the corner and chewed slowly, staring out the window. It was raining, and the drops were running down the window, just like the sweat on her temple. From the tension. In the evening, she took a long route home to save money on transportation. She had some change in her pocket and reports in her backpack. At home, her mother was sitting in front of the TV. The channel was muted. Only the ticker was running. "Where have you been?" she asked hoarsely, without even turning around. "At work. First day." "So, did they take you into their kingdom?" Sophia took off her shoes. Her socks were wet. The floor was freezing. "It's an internship. A trial period." Her mother finally turned around. "So it's free. Of course. They can always save money on people like you." Something inside her trembled. She wanted to scream, "I'm tired!" But her voice seemed to be stuck in her throat, like when she was a child and couldn't say the word "Dad" without crying. She went into her room. She sat down on the bed. In the corner stood a worn wardrobe with a box of her old certificates on top. Olympic winner, laureate, participant, papers that meant nothing. Next to them was a note. "Don't forget to pay the electricity bill by Friday." At work, the days blurred into one. Sophia arrived before everyone else and left after everyone else, but not because she wanted to impress anyone, because it was worse at home. At least it was warm in the office. One evening, Thomas stepped out of the elevator and saw her at her desk. "Everyone's gone. Why are you still here?" "Checking the balances. There's a mistake in the October report." "That's not your job." "If I don't fix it, the numbers will only add up on paper. Not in real life." He paused. Then he came closer. "And what's real?" Sophia looked him straight in the eye for the first time. She replied quietly, "Real is when your mom is sick, and you run out of money in the third week of the month. Real is when you're smart, but not yourself. When there's only a wall behind you, not someone who says, 'I'm here for you.'" He nodded. He didn't say anything. He just took a chocolate bar from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. "Eat this. Otherwise, your brain will shut down." She smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in a long time. It wasn't a joke. It was because someone had seen her, not as a cheap employee, but as a human being. But the next day, everything went back to normal. Her co-workers didn't talk to her. They avoided her in the cafeteria. Someone once stuck a sticker on her monitor that read, "Genius of the neighborhood." She tore it off without hesitation. But inside, she felt empty again. One evening, she came home later than usual. Her mother was already asleep. There was a cold pot of pasta on the stove. Thoughts flooded her mind. What if I don't get paid tomorrow? What if they don't renew my contract? What if I get sick? She took out her notebook and started counting again, as if adding up the numbers would somehow fix her life. What happened next changed everything. You won't want to miss how this girl with a notebook shook up the entire system. Her first reaction was not scandal, hysteria, or alarm. It was surprise. Sophia was sitting over the spreadsheet when she noticed that the same contractors were listed in the reports for September and October. The amounts were large, the transfers were regular, but none of the suppliers were listed in the documents they had recently analyzed in another department. That meant either someone had allowed double funding, or something was wrong here. She printed out both reports. She sat there until evening. She compared, wrote down, and added up. The numbers didn't add up. Hundreds of thousands were missing somewhere, and every time it was the same names. Strange companies with no addresses and almost identical registration numbers. The lights went out in the office. People left. Someone slammed a door. Someone laughed loudly in the hallway. Sophia was left alone. She went to the coffee machine, poured herself a cup of bitter coffee, and returned to her desk. She leafed through the reports until her eyes began to water from the numbers. Something was rotten here. But she didn't yet understand how bad it was. The next morning, Thomas was walking by again. She stopped him at the elevator, hesitantly, as if crossing a line. "Excuse me, I have a question about the third quarter reports." He stopped. "What about them?" "There are duplicate amounts, repeated contractors, and no confirmations anywhere." He narrowed his eyes. She moved closer. "Do you have printouts?" "Yes, but I didn't want to. I just checked so as not to jump to conclusions." He nodded. "Leave them on the table. I'll take a look." She returned to her desk, folded the documents, and carefully placed them in a transparent folder. Her hand was shaking inside. Something told her that this wasn't just a mistake, but she went ahead and put the papers on his desk anyway. Thomas didn't show up all day. Sophia worked in silence. Her eyes were watering from the tension, and her neck was stiff. Her colleagues were whispering behind her back again. Someone threw a comment her way. Saving the world again? She didn't answer. In the evening, she was about to leave when the secretary called her. Sophia, Thomas asked you to come in. Now. Her heart leapt. She wiped her hands on her dress and went in. Thomas was standing by the window, holding the very same folder. Do you understand what you've gotten yourself into? Sophia pressed her lips together. I just found some inconsistencies, nothing more. He moved closer. These aren't just inconsistencies. This could be a serious scheme. If you're right, we've been fooled for years. Do you understand what that means? I didn't mean to accuse anyone, but you've already taken the first step, and now there's no turning back. Sophia felt ice inside. Everything, her back, her fingers, even her breath, seemed frozen. She didn't know whether to be happy or afraid. But one thing was clear. Something had been set in motion, and it was impossible to stop it now. From that moment on, the countdown began. Everything that had been held together by lies began to crack, and Sophia was no longer the person she had been. The next morning, Sophia woke up with a feeling that couldn't be described as fear. It was a different kind of feeling, like you had accidentally walked into the wrong room, and now you didn't know if you could get out. Hair was scattered on the bathroom floor. Yellow water was running from the tap. Her mother was coughing heavily in the room, wheezing as if she couldn't push out everything that had built up over her lifetime. Sophia looked at herself in the mirror, pressing her palm against her cheek. Where there had once been freshness, there were now bruises, fatigue, and the realization that she was no longer a girl, even if she wasn't yet 30. Thomas was silent at the office. Only once did he say in passing, "Don't tell anyone about this, not even yourself." She nodded, but she didn't feel any better. Too much had started with that folder. Now she felt like someone was watching her, at least with their eyes. The secretary gave her a strange look when Sophia entered the elevator. A colleague from accounting suddenly remembered her amazing ability to snoop around other people's business. And in the evening, someone deleted her calculations from the shared server. Strange, shrugged the IT department. That never happens here. Maybe you deleted them yourself. Sophia clenched her teeth. Anger was rising inside her. Not hysterical, but quiet, like an icy wind. The kind that comes when someone tries to put you in your place, and you suddenly realize that there is no place left for you. She came home later than usual that evening. Her mother greeted her with the words, "What are you wandering around for? Are you carrying documents in your skirt again?" "We're investigating," Sophia replied quietly. "Interesting. Will you get paid for that?" "I don't know." "Then why are you getting involved? Or have you decided you're a heroine?" She wanted to say something, but she froze, because everything had already been said, years ago, when her father left and her mother said, "He never loved you. You're a stranger to him." Then and now, it felt the same. Sophia didn't sleep that night. She rummaged through papers, checked, copied, scanned. At one point, she threw up right at her desk. From exhaustion, stress, loneliness, she wiped her mouth and sat back down. It was as if she didn't have the right to give up. An inner voice said, "Forget it. Leave. You'll find another job. This isn't your fight." Another voice, quieter but deeper, said, "If you leave now, you'll be leaving your whole life." The next day, Thomas invited her into his office. He was holding a folder. His gaze was heavy. I made a few calls. These companies are fake. They're registered to drivers, concierges, dead people. We're being used as a money laundering tool." She was silent. "You need to think about it," he added. "Continue or leave. If I leave, someone else will continue, and they might have it worse." He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "If you choose to continue, hang in there. You won't get any praise, and no one will save you. Not me, not anyone else." She smiled wryly. "I've gone my whole life without a lifeguard. I've learned how to swim." She had made her choice, but she didn't yet know who she was up against. Ahead of her lay something that would break anyone, but not her. The morning was unusually bright. Sophia stood at the office window, watching as boxes were slowly unloaded in the parking lot. Life went on. Cars came and went. People carried coffee, took selfies, made vacation plans, and she was gathering evidence that this whole life was built on lies. And if she told the truth, it wouldn't just be a scheme that would collapse, but someone's careers, names, families. She opened the internal system and downloaded everything she had collected over the past 2 weeks. Files, screenshots, comments, formulas, everything that could be shown. No guesswork, just facts. Then she stood up. She went to the door. She didn't knock. She went right in. Thomas was sitting at his desk, reading reports. He looked up, saw her face, and immediately understood. He bowed his head and closed the folder. "I'm done," she said. "Everything is here. If I'm not here tomorrow, you know why." He didn't answer right away. He just stood up. He walked over. He took the flash drive from her hand. He squeezed her fingers, tightly, but gently. "You did your part. The rest is mine." She wanted to say something, but couldn't. She just nodded and left. From that moment on, she became a stranger to everyone. People stopped saying hello. Some moved away when she sat down in the cafeteria. Some whispered, "She ratted us out." But the worst thing was the silence. Thick, sticky, just like at her mother's house. Thomas called her in 2 days later. He looked tired, but not broken. "The audit is starting. The board of directors is aware, but that's just the top. Below us, it's ice. If it cracks, we're all gone." "I don't regret it," Sophia replied. He looked out the window. Then, as if in passing, he added, "You do realize you're a target now, don't you?" "I've always been a target. It's just that no one ever shot at me before." He smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was an adult smile. When she got home that evening, she found dirty handprints on the door, as if someone had been holding the lock for too long. Inside the refrigerator, someone had opened the lid of a pot. The money was still in her purse, but she knew what it meant. A warning. Or reconnaissance. She didn't go to the police. She knew it was too early. As long as you're alive, you can't prove that you've been threatened. The next morning, she came to the office wearing the same dress, the same shoes, carrying the same notebook. But she was no longer the same person. She was no longer just a poor girl from the neighborhood. She was no longer convenient. She was no longer invisible. Now she was dangerous. She had crossed the line. There was no turning back, and ahead of her were those who did not forgive the courage of others. It all started with a cup of tea. Sophia was standing by the microwave, heating up some soup. Her eyes stung from lack of sleep. Her back ached, as if she had been beaten. No one had spoken to her for 2 days. Even those who used to nod to her in the hallway now turned away as if she had a contagious disease. It was as if she had been turned off, like a burnt-out light bulb in an office. Inconvenient, but not worth fixing. He came up behind her and put his mug down next to hers. "I'll wait a minute. It's like the library," said Tomas. She flinched slightly. Not because of him, because she had forgotten what a normal voice sounded like. "Are you still here?" she asked. "I thought you'd all run away. Or been fired." He smiled. "I'm unsinkable. See you later." She didn't know what to say. Then he suddenly leaned toward her and added in a whisper, "Someone broke into my desk last night. Don't answer the phone if you don't know the number." Sophia nodded. Then, as if defending herself, she exhaled. "I haven't answered the phone in a long time, even if it's someone I know, especially if it's family." He turned around. He sat down on the edge of the table. "Do you have anyone?" "My mother. Half dead, half alive. She still says I'm ruining her life. What about you?" "Just work. And coffee. Sometimes I take out my guitar, but the neighbors think I'm having a seizure." She smiled. For the first time, it was sincere. Then he suddenly said, "You have a talent. Not for numbers, for the truth. A rare thing. The truth is like poverty. Everyone says they respect it, but no one wants to see it up close." They sat in silence. No jokes, no flirting, just two broken adults who for a moment found in each other not a cure, but a respite. From then on, Thomas began to visit more often. Sometimes he would just stop by and leave a chocolate bar. Sometimes he would ask her opinion on his calculations. Sometimes he would stand next to her on the landing and remain silent. Once he drove her home, just because it was late and the subway wasn't running. They rode in silence, and only when they pulled up to her house did he say, "When this is all over, let's go get some coffee. Not here. Somewhere where no one knows us. What if it doesn't end? Then we'll go anyway, just to spite everything." She got out of the car, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel warmth, not peace, but something alive. Small. Funny. Silly. As if there was still a piece of the world where she wasn't a mistake. She had found someone who listened to her. But the world doesn't like those who unite, especially if they're dangerous together. Since then, everything has changed. Not on the outside. The office still smelled of paper, dry air, and other people's ambitions. But inside, Sophia felt like she had gotten back on her feet. She didn't wait for someone to pat her on the shoulder. She didn't expect thanks. She just knew that her work had meaning. Not for a bonus, not for a promotion, but simply because without her, everything would fall apart. She got up before everyone else, came to the empty office, turned on the lamp, and sorted through reports. At first, the secretary gave her sidelong glances, but then she started bringing her coffee. Every other day, Thomas would leave a note on her desk. "I see everything. I understand everything. Don't give up." And she didn't give up. Soon she began to see details she hadn't noticed before. Small transactions, excessive expenses, duplicate transfers. She gave Thomas her findings, and he pulled out his contacts. They worked as a team, without words, without grand gestures, just with precision and trust. It felt like someone was there after all. Not a savior, not an angel, not a knight, just a person who believed. Sometimes they went out to lunch together, but not to the cafeteria. They went to the nearest park with a thermos and sandwiches. Thomas sat on a bench with his sleeves rolled up and talked about fishing. Sophia listened as he described the cold river water as if it were a whole world. Quiet, without numbers, without pain. Once he asked, "What did you want to be when you were a child?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "An astronomer. I wanted to count the stars. My mother said, 'In our family we don't look at the sky. We look at our feet, looking for change.'" He chuckled. "That's a shame. You would have been good at it." For the first time in years, Sophia allowed herself to smile, not out of politeness, but because something warmed her heart. But with each passing day, The tension in the office grew. Some of the older employees left due to family circumstances. One of the directors suddenly fell ill. Several employees began complaining about information leaks. Rumors of an internal investigation began to circulate, and many began to look at Sophia with concern. Not with anger, but with fear. Like someone who could press a button. At some point, she began to feel that she was being followed. Whether it was her imagination or not, there was always a car parked near her house. Someone asked her in the elevator if she lived alone. She found cigarette butts in the stairwell, even though none of her neighbors smoked. Late one night, someone knocked on her door. Her mother was asleep. Sophia stood behind the door, holding her breath. The knock came again. Slowly, insistently. She didn't open it. Then, when everything was quiet, she peeked through the peephole. No one was there. But in the morning light, she noticed a piece of paper on the doormat. Empty, but with dents, as if something had been in it before. She took it to Thomas. He looked at it and pursed his lips. "They're playing with your nerves, testing how long you can hold out." "What if I can't?" "You're not broken, they are. They're more scared than you are." Several days passed in silence, and then, boom! The company with the most left translations announced bankruptcy. Sophia and Thomas knew it was a diversionary tactic, to blame everything on a partner who let them down. "They need to close the case," he said, "or destroy her, or you." She nodded silently. That night, she didn't go home. Thomas drove her to a rented apartment he had taken just in case. It was a small room with a dusty sofa and the smell of mold. But it had a lock, and it was quiet. "It won't be for long," he said. "I promise." She looked at him. "You always promise." He shrugged. "This time, I'll try not to fail." She lay down on the sofa and wrapped herself in her coat. Thomas sat down next to her. There was silence between them, not deafening, but warm. The kind of silence where no one is hiding. She almost let it all out. But the closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. In the next second, everything would fall apart. They left the building late in the evening. Thomas kept his hand in his pocket. There was a flash drive with the final files. Sophia walked beside him, clutching the strap of her backpack so tightly that her knuckles turned white. It had been a difficult day. The board of directors had heard the report. Nervous glances, clenched jaws, fake smiles. Everyone was trying to remain above suspicion. But Thomas spoke bluntly. He presented numbers and facts, without accusations, only conclusions. Sophia stood behind him, and for the first time, felt like she wasn't from the basement, but part of something real. They had done the impossible, exposed the system. They had brought evidence. Now it was up to the others, or to fate. The parking lot was empty. Thomas took out his keys and pressed the alarm. The car beeped. Sophia felt cold, not from the wind, but from within. Instinct, an old memory of the body, like when your mother grabbed you by the shoulder from behind as a child, without shouting, but you knew it was going to be bad. "Wait," she said suddenly. Thomas turned around. He didn't have time to say anything. 3 men emerged from the darkness, calmly. No masks. Their faces were ordinary, like those of people who repair cables or check meters. One nodded. "Thomas?" He didn't answer. He just took a step back, shielding Sophia with his body. "You've lost something," said the second man, taking a thin folder out of his pocket. It wasn't theirs. Sophia took a step back. Thomas clenched his fist in his pocket. "We already gave you everything," he said quietly. "It's too late." "Too late is when there's no one left to look for," replied the third man. Sophia felt everything inside her tighten. It was as if the air had become thick. One of the men took a step forward. Thomas shook his head almost imperceptibly. "Don't come any closer." But it was too late. The shot wasn't loud. It sounded more like a slap on the cheek. Thomas staggered, grabbed his side, but remained standing. Sophia screamed, not out of fear, but out of rage. It was as if something she had been holding onto for years had snapped inside her. The men backed away, quickly, decisively, without panic. They didn't finish him off. They didn't shout. They just disappeared. Thomas slumped to the ground. His hand was covered in blood. He looked at her and tried to smile. "Don't you dare fall down next to him. We need you on your feet." Sophia rushed to him. She took out her phone and called an ambulance. Everything inside her was shaking, but her fingers were steady. Her breathing was even. Not a single tear. When they took him away, she held his hand until the very end. Then she was left alone in the empty parking lot, under the dim light of a street lamp, in a coat that smelled of someone else's blood. She raised her head, and she realized that now everything was up to her. Everything she had feared had already happened. And now there was no turning back. Ahead of her lay revenge, the truth, and a price that no one was willing to pay. Except her. Since then, everything has slowed down. The air is thick. Time is elastic. Words are sharp. Thomas was in the hospital. The prognosis was uncertain. The doctor said, "He's conscious, but he can't talk yet." Sophia nodded as if she accepted it. But inside, everything was crumbling, like thin ice under her shoes. Officially, the company announced an unscheduled incident and declined to comment. It was as if Thomas had been erased from memory. His name was not mentioned. His office was already empty. No one said, "I'm sorry." Only one person from the department whispered in the hallway, "You do realize that now they'll come after you, right?" She didn't answer. She just walked past. There was no anger in her eyes, no fear, only pain. The kind of pain that doesn't make you scream, but makes you clean your desk until it shines, because you don't have the strength to do anything else. Sophia showed up at work the next day. She sat down at her old desk. She turned on her computer. She opened her spreadsheets. The same numbers, the same windows. But now everything felt different, like before a storm. Those who had despised her now looked at her with caution. Those who had been silent had disappeared altogether. In the evening, she was the last to leave the office. In the stairwell, she found traces of dirt again. She hardly slept. Once, in the elevator, someone in a hoodie whispered, "Who do you think you are?" and immediately got out on the next floor. She didn't tell anyone. Not the police. Not her friends. Not even herself. Internal documents began to disappear from the shared database. Several of her files were deleted. A letter arrived in the shared mailbox. "The Sophia tables are incorrect. Do not use." No signature. No explanation. She went to Tomas's deputy, a man in his 50s, with a neat haircut and indifferent eyes. He twirled the pen in his fingers when she spoke. "I'm being sabotaged. They're deleting my access, destroying my data." He shrugged. "Maybe it's just a mistake? Or are you being overly emotional?" "Someone tried to kill me. Thomas is in intensive care. And you're talking about emotions? Are you sure it's all because of the tables? Are you sure they're just tables?" He didn't answer. He just stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. When she returned to her workplace, her password no longer worked. She didn't go home that evening. She sat down in a cafe across the street. She ordered tea. She sat there until closing time. Then she walked home in the drizzling rain to Tomas's apartment. The house was under guard, ever since it had been shot at. Sophia stared at the windows as if looking for an answer. Then she just sat down on a bench. And sat there. Faces flashed through her mind. Everyone who had ever told her Don't get involved. Take it easy. It's not worth it. Everyone who taught her how to live properly. They were right. But she couldn't live like that anymore. She was alone against the system. But if she had been silent before, now she had no reason to be silent. And no one was ready for what she was going to say. On the third day, Sophia couldn't take it anymore and went to the hospital. Thomas was conscious. Pale, emaciated, with an IV and an oxygen tube, he lay as if he had not yet returned from that parking lot. She sat down next to him. She looked at him. He opened his eyes and met her gaze. "Are you alive?" she whispered. He nodded slowly. Then, weakly, almost silently, "Are you?" Sophia didn't answer. She didn't know. After that day, everything went downhill. She returned to the office and discovered that her card no longer worked. The secretary looked away. One of her former friends said with feigned regret, "Well, you knew it would happen." Tomas's office was empty. Her file was gone. Even her name had been removed from the database. Sophia sat down on a bench near the building. Someone's cigarette butts lay at her feet. The sky was gray and damp. Inside there was nothing. No anger. No fear. No tears. Emptiness. Like after a breath that forgot to finish. At home, her mother didn't even ask why she had come home in the middle of the day. She just said, "You ruin everything. You always ruin everything. With your mind, with your games, with your tables." Sophia was silent. She sat down against the wall. She didn't take off her shoes. Her backpack remained on her shoulder. Thoughts swirled in her head. I shouldn't have gone. I didn't save anyone. I just set them up. She took a notebook out of her backpack. She turned the pages almost mechanically. The last entry was calculations that no one had seen. A scheme that could have been proven. Only now, no one would believe her. She tore out the page, then the second, then the third, and suddenly she realized that everything she had feared had already happened. She was left without a job, without a future, without the truth, without faith, without him, and worst of all, without herself. She stood up. She went to the kitchen. She took a cup. She smashed it on the floor. The shards scattered across the linoleum as if everything inside her had also shattered. Her mother's only reaction was, "Now you're breaking dishes, too." Sophia didn't answer. She just sat down in the hallway. She hugged her knees. Her eyes were dry. But inside, she felt the same emptiness that she had seen in Thomas's eyes on the hospital bed. Everything was lost. Everything she had worked for, everything she had protected, everything she believed in. No one came. No one supported her. No one said, "You did the right thing." This was rock bottom, the point of no return. But it is here that pity is not born, but a decision. Quiet, without pathos, the last one. Sophia sat in the dark, not because she didn't turn on the light, because there was no point. The house was cold, like a hospital ward. Rain was falling outside the window, and it seemed like a continuation of her thoughts. Gray, sticky, endless. Pages lay scattered on the floor, torn, with crumpled edges. Formulas, diagrams, numbers. Everything she once considered her strength was now rubbish. She looked at them as if they were fragments of a person who no longer existed. You always ruin everything. Her mother's words echoed inside her head, like a spell, like a sentence. Too perfect. Thomas's words, also like a sentence, but different, honest. He wasn't accusing her. He was warning her. But she went anyway, because she didn't know any better, because she couldn't live with her eyes closed anymore. Sophia covered her face with her hands. Her chest tightened, not from pain, from realization. She remembered herself as a child, sitting by the window, looking at the stars. Back then, she thought that when she grew up, she would be someone, not rich, not famous, but needed, to make the world a little bit more honest. And then everything went downhill. Her father left. Her mother became embittered. Home became a prison. School a battlefield. Only numbers gave her a sense of order. Law, answers. "You're not one to give up," Thomas' voice echoed in her mind. There was no romance or support in it, just a fact. He simply knew, and he believed it. There, where no one even looked in her direction. Sophia stood up, slowly, as if returning to her body. She went to the kitchen, put the kettle on. While it boiled, she laid out clean sheets of paper on the table. She opened an old notebook, the one she had hidden as a child, where there were still sketches of space on the wallpaper, where every star had its own formula, its own name. She remembered how her mother had once torn these sheets off the wall, throwing them down and saying, "Who do you think you are?" But now she was no longer a girl, and she wasn't waiting for permission. Sophia took a sip of hot water and began to write. Not because she believed in justice, not because she hoped to win, but because if she didn't write it down, it would all disappear. And if it disappeared, then it would all have been for nothing. Suddenly, it became quiet. Not in the house. Inside her. The kind of silence that comes when you stop hoping, but you don't stop acting. And then she understood. She had not been betrayed. She had simply never been protected, and now she was her own shield. She had survived a night that not everyone could have endured. And in that silence, the most important thing was born. A decision. Without shouting. Without complaints. Only the truth. Sophia got up early in the morning. She hadn't set her alarm. She woke up on her own. Her body still remembered the fatigue, but her eyes were clear. The kind of clarity that comes after a storm, when everything is destroyed, and you suddenly see where the ground really is and where the illusion is. She got dressed without rushing. An old dress, the same boots, but no longer a sign of poverty. Now they were her armor. She tied her hair back, threw a notebook and a flash drive into her backpack. She made tea. For the first time in many days, she did so calmly, pausing, like someone who was no longer running. Her mother came out of the room and saw Sophia standing in the kitchen. "Getting back to your old ways?" she asked, yawning. Sophia turned to her, not sharply, not in tears, calmly. "Yes, I am. Because if I don't, dozens more like me will survive, and dozens more like you, those who remain silent." Her mother said nothing. She just turned away. As always. Only this time Sophia felt no pain, no guilt, no desire to be understood. Everything was behind her. Now there was silence. She left the house. The street smelled of dust and baked bread. On the way, she passed a woman with a child, a dog without a collar, an old man arguing with a vending machine for water. Everything was as usual. Only inside her, it wasn't. Sophia didn't go to the office. She headed for the audit commission building. There was a man there who used to be listened to even by those who considered themselves above the law. She had to wait in the reception area for almost an hour. No water, no smiles. Only a chair with worn upholstery and a calendar from last year. When she was finally let in, she entered. She took out a flash drive. She put it on the table. This is a chain of fictitious transfers over the past 2 years. The company Corvin Finance was used as a link. Thomas and I checked every transaction. He's in the hospital. I was fired. The man at the desk was silent. "I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. I'm just a man who knows how numbers add up. And I know when they're lying." He took the flash drive, nodded. "Were you warned that this wasn't a bonus? I already paid everything." She left feeling, not relieved, but at peace. She had done everything she could. No guarantees, no insurance, no support. But she did it. That evening, when she arrived at the hospital, Thomas opened his eyes. "Someone brought something for you," said the nurse. "An envelope. No name." Sophia opened it. There was a note inside. "Sometimes one person is a whole wall. And if you're not afraid to be a wall, you're not alone." She wasn't expecting a miracle. She wasn't counting on a happy ending. But the truth had been told, and now, either the world would hear it, or it would collapse along with her. They arrived unexpectedly, as always. 2 men in dark suits, one in a light-colored shirt. No warning, no press releases. They simply entered the company building in the middle of the working day and went straight to Tomas's deputy's office. Sophia was downstairs in the lobby at the time, wanting to collect the rest of her things from her desk. No one was waiting for her, and certainly no one was going to greet her. When she climbed the stairs, the door was already open. Inside, a conversation was taking place. Businesslike, cold, emotionless. "We have reason to believe that the financial statements for several quarters have been falsified. We have documentary evidence." "This is a misunderstanding," said the deputy. "I didn't sign anything. I'm just a subordinate." Sophia stood in the hallway. She listened, and only then did it dawn on her. That was it. The end had begun, and it was happening right before her eyes. One of the inspectors came out. He saw her. He approached her. "Sophia?" "Yes." "Are you the one who submitted the materials?" She nodded. He took a sheet of paper out of his folder. "We will list your name as the complainant. Would you like to give an official statement?" She looked at him, then at the door. And only then did she answer, "Yes, but on one condition." "What is it?" "No one will cross me out anymore." Later, in the interrogation room, she sat at the table and told everything, in order, as it happened, clearly, without unnecessary details, without making excuses, without fear. When she finished, the man closed his laptop and said, "Do you understand what you've done?" "No," she replied honestly. "I just couldn't keep quiet anymore." A few days passed. She was called in again. They asked her to confirm the calculations, to sign the report. Then they came to her home again, not to threaten her, to thank her. Thomas was discharged from the hospital. He still walked slowly, but his gaze was the same as before, attentive, lively. They met in the park, where they had once eaten sandwiches on a bench. Thomas was holding a bag of apples. "Listen," he said, sitting down. "I thought you'd give up." "I thought so too," she smiled. "What are you going to do now?" "I'm counting. I'm still counting. Only now, I'm counting myself too. Not just others." He handed her an apple. "I didn't think a girl could turn a car around like that." "I'm not a girl, Thomas." He nodded. He agreed. And that was more important than any award. The truth had been told. The consequences began. But the most important thing was that she remained herself. Not perfect, not saved, just herself. And that was enough. The morning began as always, with silence. Sophia stood at the stove and stirred the oatmeal. The kitchen was warm. The window was fogged up with steam, and she drew a small star on the glass with her finger. Childish, uneven, just like the one she had once drawn on the wallpaper. A simple wooden calendar hung on the wall. New. Clean. The first page was blank. Next to it on the shelf was a notebook. The same one. Only now it wasn't worn, but had a cover. Contained more than just calculations. There were words, thoughts, stories. Everything that had accumulated over the years and had no outlet. She heard footsteps behind her. "Are you up already?" Thomas's voice was still hoarse. "I can't sleep," she replied. "It's too quiet." He sat down at the table. She put a mug of tea in front of him. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't talk about the future. They just sat there together. The letter from the commission was in the drawer. There, in black and white, it said, "Your actions contributed to the launch of an internal audit and a systemic cleanup. No thanks, no awards, just acknowledgement." But she didn't need anything else. She sat down across from him, took a sip, looked out the window. The world was the same. Damp streets, gloomy people, the smell of cheap coffee from the nearby kiosk. But inside, it was different. Not easier, not happier, just real. Now she knew, even if they tell you that you are nobody, even if they close the door on you, even if you are left alone, you can still change something. Maybe small, maybe insignificant, but real. And that means it's not for nothing. If you've ever felt like the whole world is against you, write the word perseverance in the comments. This story is for those who don't give up, even when they're alone.